Good afternoon and welcome back. The boys are looking at the boulders. This is men's problem number 1. Joining me in the commentary box today, Ken Jennings, one of the route setters involved in this competition and the official speed technician as well, responsible for making sure that the speed wall works and that there's no issues there. Ken, welcome back.
Hi Alistair, it's great to be back. It's great that speed is finally over. A lot of stress on making sure that everything runs and all the climbers are starting and no timer issues and so on. But we're finally onto the showy side of things. Some pretty exciting boulders. Having climbed and forerun all of these, I can tell you we're going to have a good show today. And looking at everyone with the observation time, the guys are looking pretty psyched to get on these boulders.
In the background there in the red shirt you can see Robert Breyer, owner of City Rock Cape Town and City Rock Johannesburg, the venue for this event here. You can see the boys having a look at the boulder, wondering what they're going to be doing to make their way up here. Ken, could you tell us a little bit about this boulder?
Yeah, so the first men's boulder today is a very springy, jumpy coordination boulder. We did try to climb everything and busted and did our best to see if it can be done statically. It does make it a lot harder. So jumping is the way, definitely on boulder 1. And the top hold, which is probably the biggest jug on the earth, actually has a little blocker hidden in the middle of it at the top. So a blocker is just a hold in the actual jug to they're going to have to get their pinpoint accuracy. They can't just throw for anywhere on that top hold.
You can actually see that blocker from this view in the center there, that little bump in the center of the top hold. On to men's 2 on the slab. You can see the guys having a little feel of the starting holds. For those of you that aren't aware, the competitors are only allowed to touch the marked start holds. If they touch any other hold, it'll count as an attempt. The goal in bouldering to get to the top in as few attempts as possible, so they want to do everything they can to limit the number of attempts it takes them, and that includes making a mistake by touching a hole during the observation period.
For me, this problems was definitely the toughest for me personally, and I think a lot of the competitors are going to have to be very careful with the number of attempts on this boulder. It's really easy to slip off, pretty high risk, and the start's pretty easy to get into, and then you've got to start palming, pulling and smearing your way up those volumes. The zone hold is actually a little hidden dual text undercling and up to that volume finish at the top.
Those of you that are more experienced climbers might recognize that as a thumbercling, an undercling that you can almost only hold with your thumbs if you're in the wrong position. You can see some of the officials there, the head route setter just making sure that they're all following the rules during the observation period. Boulder. Boulder 2 on the slab. Let's see how problem number 3 looks. There you can see the top hold of problem 2. All of these gentlemen will be hoping to lay their hands on that top hold and hold it for a few seconds to get given the top. Heading over to problem 3.
Problem 3, the most definitely my favorite problem as a route setter and as a spectator. You're going to see some spectacular moves happening here. Really had to get creative, and there's actually a little hidden feature which I won't disclose just yet. I suppose the experienced climbers will be able to see what to do there, but for everyone at home, I think you're going to have a really good final end. Chris Costa there, you can see when his head really shakes around, he's really excited. So, and I can tell you now that everyone is smiling under those masks. Psyched to get on this boulder and try.
Yeah, this boulder really little interesting and different to the usual competition style boulders that we see here, but this is a climbing competition, and I'm sure you'll see some really exciting climbing coming up on problem 3 in the next little while.
Yeah, so this problem requiring some very technical hand skills, holding some bad holds, and it's really humid and hot here in Cape Town, and I can tell you in this gym there's a lot of moisture on those holds today, so the athletes brushing, it's going to be so important for them, and taking their time, making sure their hands are chalked up. And right at the top, those last 3 holds, the texture's not too great, so they're going to have to squeeze really hard, and I think we're going to see a few guys coming off right at the top there.
For those of you that are interested in the first discipline that happened in this competition, the speed climbing, we have some speed results for you. They should be popping up on your screen in a minute or two. You can see the top of this boulder, not really the greatest footholds on those volumes. Competitors have to really activate their core and maintain some body tension not to slip off those holds. Here we have the speed and their times. Chris Costa obviously in first place. His fastest run 6.91, just a fraction, 4 fractions of a second off his personal best. Calvin Curtis, I was told, did get a personal best in the speed today, 7.6 second. A few falls, one from Oliver Marks, one from Christopher Wallace. Not the result they were hoping for, but now they have some time on the boulders to make up for that.
And don't discount the speed. Just remember, with the calculation that calculates the overall winner in a combined competition, speed does matter. So these guys wanted to win their races and get a good placement, and that just sets the stage for a good final, boulder finals, and then trying hard in the lead finals. I think everyone today is going to want to try hard and get to the top of everything, leave all their skin on the wall, just to get those placements as high as they can.
For those of you that aren't familiar with how bouldering works, the top is the most important hold on each of these problems. Just below that, the zone hold used to separate athletes that don't make it to the top, and the number of attempts are used to separate athletes that make it to the zone or the top. So the goal is for these climbers to get to the top in the shortest number of tries, and first try obviously being the best that they can do, but not always possible, and the route setters have intended splitting up these athletes so that we don't have too many ties. We are back. Matthew Groenewald is on the wall, hopping on for his first attempt on men's boulder 1. Doing well to read the beta, but just not getting his body into the correct position to hold that just yet.
This boulder requires a good amount of coordination, and they're going to be crossing over with their left hand, trying to latch that hold on the blue cube volume, and then palm off to control the swing. Not a particularly hard move, but hard to learn very quickly in the 4 minutes that is given.
Yeah, a lot of these boulders, you're looking at them, you think, maybe I could climb that. but could you climb it in 4 minutes just having run speed? That's the test for these athletes, to figure it out in the short time possible and be able to climb it as well.
You're going to see a lot of the climbers on this problem looking at their left hand. The hold that they're jumping to is really sharp. So it's going to just cut into that first pad, and they're going to have to manage the amount of attempts on those fingers, because it does matter later on. Remember, they've got 2 boulders after this. They're going to require, if they damage the skin too much on their fingers, it'll make the other boulders a bit harder, and then could make the lead route that they have to climb harder.
Yeah, time and skin being some of the limits placed on these athletes in this competition. Matthew doing well to pace himself here, but he also knows that he's not going to get to the top by standing on the mat. He has to try this boulder. Matthew nearly getting into the right position there and just having a look at his skin there, wondering if it'll hold out.
There's definitely a lot of considerations being a competitor, managing your pump, managing the time on the holds, and there you can see he's trying the desperate move, as the route setters would call it, just trying to jump and not do it the way that it's intended. So as the setters have set it to make it as easy as we can, and Matthew can do the move, he just has to try really hard and engage his shoulders and just control that swing.
Yeah, one of the tricky things in coordination and momentum based problems like this is generating enough momentum to get your body into that position, but not so much that that momentum pulls you off. So each attempt for a competitor counts when they lift their feet off the ground, even if they don't get into the official start position. Matthew trying a slightly different technique there. Do you think that'll work without the left hand, without the right hand on the volume to hold him?
Yeah, so that right hand popping off the start hold is just there to help control that swing. So he's got the entire volume there to kind of play with, to figure out where the palm down would work best. I think you could do a big crossover if your crimp strength is strong enough on that right hand on the start. And there you see the importance of that right hand palm down to control that swing. So it can be done that way, I reckon. I do think it's a bit harder though.
Matthew with just less than 30 seconds left on the clock. You might have heard the 1 minute buzzer sounding a little while ago. Matthew ramping up his attempts here in an effort to get to the next hold, which is the zone hold. Matthew will be out of time there. Another Matthew running out with the brushes.
And it's going to be really important to have those brushes today. Like I said, the humidity is really high, and when competitors get desperate, they start doing a lot of attempts. Those holes get really dirty, and the texture fills with chalk, making it a lot harder to latch those holes.
Yeah, Kent, the Connie's in the gym today. Quite warm, quite humid, and that really affects how easy a boulder is to start. You can see young Christopher Wallace taking a moment to really show the judges that he started correctly before taking his foot off the start. To start a boulder, an athlete needs each of their limbs on one of those holds marked with a red piece of tape. In this case, it's quite obvious that it needs to be 2 hands and 2 feet. Chris going to see how that hold feels with the left hand. Just checking something with the officials.
So yeah, they're just calling into question the start positions and just clarifying there so that the judges know exactly what they're looking at. And Chris did start correctly there. You can see there that hold is good and sharp, but that swing is the killer. Remember, this wall's just about 45 degrees overhanging, so it's going to kick you off. The harder and faster you jump, the more momentum you have, and you're going to have to kill that momentum to just squeeze and hold this first move, and then hopefully move up to the top.
Can see that left hand start hold placed quite low in relation to the next hold, just to ensure that athletes can't keep their hand on there while holding a right hand on that first cube volume. Cube volume is being made locally here in South Africa, small company in Johannesburg. Can check them out on Instagram if you're interested.
Shout out to Josh. Upping the route setting standard in South Africa, which is going to make the difference to all athletes and general climbers. There you see awesome control, and now into the fridge section, or as the route setters called it, you're going to want to actually jump to this and then jump into it and squeeze and then pop. Yeah, there you go.
Yo.
So that's a bit of the harder way of doing it. The route setters found the easier way to just hop into it and jump as if you're jumping onto a refrigerator and squeezing the sides of it. So like I said, very dynamic boulder this. And luckily after this they have a slab, so their arms get a bit of a rest, and then onto that third problem, back onto the overhang. So they can try really hard and work their biceps a bit on this first problem.
Yeah, Kent, I don't know if you noticed there, but Chris taking a moment just to grab hold of the zone hold and making sure he gets the zone on that attempt.
That was his, yeah, that's, I actually didn't realize that was his first time up there. So making sure he gets that zone hold, and you can see once he's learned that move, he can now start figuring out the next section.
Yeah, those cube volumes providing just not enough friction for young Chris Wallace. He really needs to activate his chest and his back there to pull, create some tension between those two holds to stop his body sliding off.
So on those blue volumes you can see the piece of white, that's actually some really slippery plastic, nice Geotex, and it makes it pretty hard to keep a thumb on, so you have to squeeze, dropping your elbows down, engaging your back like Alistair said, and set up for the next big move to the top, that big yellow hold, and that's hopefully going to inspire a lot of confidence in the climbers to actually just commit on that last move.
Up next on the boulders, James Barnes didn't have the speed run he was hoping for. The man used to work in a bouldering gym in KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, Southern Rock. Quite at home on the boulders. Can see much more comfortable going into that first move there.
Less
This
jumping.
is still his first attempt. He'll be quite glad to have gotten the zone on this first attempt. Of course, he'd really love to get the top, and James just missing the coordination there, but nailing the beta.
Shaking, nodding his head, knowing exactly what he needs to do, and he's probably going to end up taking a bit of time now. And there you see the signal for that brush, making sure get all that slime and humidity off those holds as much as he can, because he's going to try on this next attempt definitely go for the 1-2 into that fridge squeeze. And again, all of these moves are well within the athlete's ability. It's just whether they have these moves in their moves dictionary, as the route setters will call it. So a dictionary of moves that you've been exposed to before, and whether you can identify them and execute them in those 4 minutes. And here we go. We could see our first top here. There we go.
Can see a little bit of the fatigue. It's only given one attempt so far on this boulder, but the steep overhanging nature really sapping the strength from the fingers and the upper body.
And also that speed. I think a lot of people discount the speed and how athletic you have to be to move up a 15-meter wall in under 10 seconds. Come try the speed wall at City Rock and you'll see how difficult it is to get up there that fast.
Ironically, the speed wall in a way gets easier the faster you climb it. To climb it quite slowly, it's actually quite hard. You need to generate a lot of momentum to move comfortably between the holds. And James sticking the move into the big squeeze, and now he's got a Big move to the top. Super psyched on the top. James with the 1 attempt to the zone and 2 attempts to the top.
I think the route setters will be very happy with that.
3 attempts to the top. My apologies.
Multiple attempts to get up there, but a definite top. And that top jug really good for celebrating on as well. Next up, Tony Flynn. He would have heard the screaming and knows what that means.
We'll see if we can get you an updated timer there. Different to Friday's qualification round. Only 4 minutes for the athletes instead of 5. In the background there, young Erin Sturkenberg, winner of yesterday's female final. Tony Flynn, Boulder 1. Looking quite comfortable, but his momentum taking him a little too far out of that left hand. Can get a good idea of the angle of the wall from this camera shot that we have here.
Oh.
Tony breaking the beta, holding that hold with the right hand.
Still really taxing that way, doing it that way. It's not necessarily easier. And he's up into that fridge squeeze and commits. There we go. Keeping his foot on.
Tony be really chuffed with a second attempt.
Yeah.
Second attempt top of Boulder 1.
Just going to have to... Next up, Oliver Marks. When you're in this situation, coming out after hearing all these screams, also adding to that psychological element, you know the boulder can be done. You know that you're on a similar caliber to these guys, so you have to do a bit of battle with the nerves and whether you can do the boulder or not in that time frame.
Yeah, Oliver's competition experience will stand him in good stead to deal with that psychological pressure.
Having climbed overseas as well, been on the Youth World stage, a veteran South African athlete, competition athlete, as you can see, now living here in Cape Town, studying, climbing on all the big rocks they have lying around in the city.
Yeah, Cape Town really is a beautiful city. Plenty of bouldering.
There we go. Slowly refining his movement there, trying to figure out where to place that palm on the right hand volume. And unfortunately the volume is white, but if you go up to it close as an athlete, you can actually see the main area where all the route setters have been trying it and where the ideal area is. But again, that'll change for different body types, and there you go, engaging that left hand shoulder going up, making sure he establishes on that zone hold. You can see those white dual textures there, and he's going to set up for the glory move. There we go.
Ollie just confirming with the judges that he does have the top. In order for an athlete's touching the top or the zone to count, they need to be in control of that hold, only with one hand for the zone, but with 2 hands for the top. David Nordia, a little smile to the judges. He knows that as one of the stronger boulderers in this field, he should be able to flash this. He's really hoping to do that. Just asking for a brush, getting this boulder into the best condition possible.
Another experienced competition climber actually went with you, Alistair, to the Youth Olympics.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that. I mean, that would have been an amazing journey out there.
Well, I'll wait till David's done on this boulder and I'll tell you a story.
A bit of a story.
Oh, David just not sticking that first move with the left hand.
So this first move is generally what the route setters will call high risk. So risk not referring to any form of danger or anything like that. It just refers to how easy it is to fall off that move. So the move could be pretty easy, but it's hard to interpret and nail on your first go, and that's the kind of move that's generally one of the competition boulders. You could see messed up the first attempt, second attempt adjusted a little bit, and now setting up for the top and commits.
Does it quite comfortably. Little shake of the head, he knows he should have got that first try. Brushes back on duty. Did we mention that it's hot and humid in the building today? No winds of sending coming through just yet. Maybe we'll see some of that for the lead. Up on the wall, Colin Curtis. Currently in third place after his performance in the speed.
If any of you want to follow the scoring, just go into the app stores and download the IFSC scoring app, and you can follow exactly. It's updated live as we go. You can see who's ranked where, how many attempts they've had, and squeezing, trying hard. You can see that left hand popping off just as he swung out into that barn door.
Yeah, Colin just asking for a brush on that hole there. It is quite sharp, as Ken mentioned earlier, but it is also, as the texture fills up with chalk, it gets harder and harder to hold. Colin getting a little bit more of his wrist involved there. Being a taller competitor, there's more wingspan to fit in the gap between those two holds, and that pushes his body further out from the wall. This is one of those interesting situations where being taller is not an advantage in climbing. Sometimes it is.
Definitely, you can see that left arm having to bend. Karen and myself are similar heights, and I know when I was trying this boulder, I had to squeeze really hard, bending my elbow. There we go. Well done, Karen. Doesn't help that the route setter who said it was actually much shorter and has a shorter wingspan than competitors like Karen. So everyone needs to adjust, whether you're tall or short. And Mr. Cossa, Christopher Cossa,
can see Christopher here with a towel on the mat. He'll use that just to get rid of some of the excess chalk that's fallen onto the mat and gotten onto his shoes.
Not only chalk, but also dust particles, anything that could be a bit hard and round falling onto the mat, and it gets onto the bottom of your sticky climbing shoes. You get onto those holds and it's like standing on marbles. There we go, making that first move look super easy.
A flash of problem one here will put Chris in the lead. No one else has flashed it yet.
And there you go, all day.
Chris really chuffed with that. That'll put him in a good position to carry his winning streak from the speed onto the boulders.
Now we're on to the real test of nerves of steel and footwork. This next boulder, I can tell you, is going to throw some of the guys for a loop. Footwork really going to matter. Can't use your biceps on this next boulder that much. So I think we're going to see some fancy footwork and hopefully a good number of attempts and tops on this next slab problem. The kryptonite of most of these competitors.
Climbing being a sport with lots of different aspects to it. Slab climbing, not a favorite of many of these strong climbers.
And it's a bit of a weird thing, especially here in Cape Town and in Rocklands. You watching all those movies, you don't often see those slab climbs, rock climbs. You see a lot of these overhanging, so it's a lot more fun to get on these overhanging routes and look really cool. But a good slab climber can look just as cool. but it is very, very frustrating when there's nothing to hold. You're palming down and getting into some weird positions on these slab climbs, and it can be very, very frustrating falling on these high risk, another form of risk. So not so much a jump, but just a weird position, weird body positions, and the texture on those, some parts of those volumes are not that great.
Yeah, moving into problem 2. This is a true test of resilience for some of these climbers. They'll be falling off a few times before they make their way up to the zone or up to the top. Here we have the start list for the boulders. Matthew up first, followed by Christopher, James, Tony, Oliver, David, Colrin, and finally Christopher Cossa.
It's a real test of nerves. The head route setter doing a lot of emphasis on the guys managing their heads and their headspace when coming onto these slab climbs. So testing a psychological aspect here as well, not just how hard you can pull on holds.
Yeah, this problem involving quite a lot of confident footwork. You can imagine walking on a roof with a pair of rollerblades. It's probably similar to that.
That's an apt description. There are a few chunks of shin missing from my legs trying some of these boulders, as you tend to think you're okay, and then all of a sudden feels like you're standing on marbles and feet pop out from under you. Goodbye to that skin on your shin.
You can actually see on the start, so the start composed of 2 volumes, the lower one there with 2 pieces of tape, and the higher one with the little start tag attached to it. You can see a black streak on the right hand side of that corner. That's from someone's shoes slipping.
I actually think that was my shoe.
That was you, Kent, during the forerunning process.
Possibly. So we're going to see some fancy footwork at the start of this boulder. A little bit of a hop into this start volume as an undercling. And there's a little screw-on foot trip just above the second volume at the bottom there. And there's going to be a bit of step through and to get that foot a little bit higher, and that hold is not good. So you can see there, establishing.
Matthew using the palm of his right hand to create some pressure between his arms, just hold his body onto the wall there. You can see a little bit of tape on the top corner of that start volume, just preventing the athletes from crimping the edge of the volume. Matthew into the thumbercling with his left hand, using his thumb. The top of that little red hold is quite slippery, not able to be held quite easily, as you can see from Matthew popping off there, but he'll be quite chuffed with himself getting the zone on his first attempt.
If you're wondering about the angles of the walls here, the different color panels on the walls, so the white wall is pretty slabby, that teal blue color is a change of angle, so it's a slightly better kind of dihedral they're going to be standing into, but you saw Matthew there trying to get some weird fancy footwork going.
Matthew back onto the start. See a really small foot there just above that first volume that they can use to help get their body a little higher. You can see just how close Matthew is keeping his body to the wall, turning his face sideways. So in an effort to get an extra few centimeters closer. Matthew just taking a moment to rest and get some chalk here. Matthew coming in for his third attempt. Can see just the footwork that's required. Matthew asking for a brush of the foot. As those footholds get filled up with rubber, the rubber of a climbing shoe being quite soft. sometimes scrapes off. You can see all those marks on the wall from various climbers over the years.
And just like any other form of climbing, some learning how to stand on volumes and how to slab climb is an acquired skill. So most of our, there's the 1 minute buzzer, most of our climbers learn to stand on really small footholds, but they don't learn how to smear correctly. So on boulders like this, you want to drop your heel and get as much of the bottom of your climbing shoe, all that rubber surface area onto a volume, and rely on that friction to stand on these holds. You might see some of the athletes wearing different shoes, changing from a more aggressive shoe, which would be better on overhangs, to somewhat of a flatter piece of rubber on the bottom of their shoe. And here we go, young Christopher Wallace out. I don't know how he's wearing long pants on a day like this, but each to their own. You can see dropping his heels really low there.
Chris going for a slightly different technique here with the right hand, using his thumb, but now going back into the palm as he realizes he needs to press outwards between his two hands to hold his body up. And the further out on that left hand, the further away from the wall his left hand is, the easier it'll be to press his body inside and into the wall, but the less space he creates for moving his legs.
This boulder being a game of friction, changing and counteracting pressures between your hand and your feet to move either or up, depending here. So you can see he will palm his right hand there so that he can get his right leg up, and then vice versa on his left side, slowly working his way up.
Chris just playing with his shoe there, wondering if he can get a little extra power out of his toes. Friction being a coefficient between pressure and surface area. As the climber shifts their weight between the different points of contact they have on the wall, it's easy to take off a little bit of that pressure, and the friction holding you in is reduced. It's quite a lot of factors for a climber to calculate here. How hard to press while still maintaining enough mobility. Chris really struggling with the foot here. Just keeps popping off as he presses into those two hands.
And this is one of those boulders where it's a balance between power and body tension, and just finding the sweet spot there is essential to see a top on this boulder.
Can see Chris just trusting his weight into that right foot now. Just managing to get his left foot up here. That's some good climbing from Chris into the zone. Can see how small that left foothold is. Chris also just trying to figure out what to do with his body here. Managing to hold a little outward swing with the undercling. The 1 minute timer left will probably incentivize Chris to make a move here. Shuffling his right hand up slips him out a little bit. Chris with just 50 seconds left will be hoping to get to the top on his next attempt. Our timer is slightly out on the screen. He has 30 seconds. Chris deciding to call it and save his skin and energy for problem 3. He'll have only as long as it takes the other climbers to do this problem to rest before It's his turn again on the next problem. Up next on the wall, James Barnes. His moustache hopefully giving him some confidence as a moustache wearer myself. There is a certain amount of satisfaction that comes from having a well-groomed moustache. James moving into the zone on his first attempt here. James, quite a well-versed and experienced climber, using all of his knowledge and experience on the slab problem. Can see him crimping the side edge of the zone hold, something possibly not anticipated by the route setters, but not quite enough to keep him on the wall.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors to take into consideration when the route setters are setting these kind of problems and forerunning the problems. That's when we test the problems. We're going to get as many of us onto these, and our job is to just A, check the quality, but B, just try to think like a competition climber and look for gaps that we might crimp. You'll see any tape on the top corner, like the top corner of the start volume there, and on the top volume hold as well, there's some black tape on an edge right at the top, just in case they decide to crimp anything or any edge of volume that we think might aid them in not doing what was intended.
James, with just over 2 minutes left, has quite a bit of time left, and he's just checking the timer there, making sure he's not going to run out of time.
James drawing on all his years of climbing, trying to find a sequence, climbing and route setting, which definitely helps. Trying to understand what's going to happen.
Can see
minutes left.
James just swapping shoes here. Athletes will often use their rest time to change their shoes to a tool more suited to the task at hand.
If the athletes, when they come out for observation, they'll take a look and see if there's two very different boulders. They might decide to bring out two different pairs of shoes like James did. But if he wants to change his shoes, he will have to bring them out with him. He cannot go back into isolation while he's technically out trying a boulder. So he's swapped his shoes out for somewhat of a softer pair, and you can see him dropping his heel, getting as much rubber on those volumes as possible.
Kent, I see the volume there on the left with the screw on it. Any chance the competitors can hold that and use that to help them with their left hand?
They can, but the problem is the area where you want to put your feet. So there's nothing to counterbalance. It is very tempting to go that way, and I think it is worth trying. But like I said, when you find that balance between power and footwork, and finding an opposing foot is very difficult on that. So possibly, but I'm not too sure.
Just less than 10 seconds left for James, and he calls his attempts on that boulder. Tony Flynn up next, South African climber, currently residing in the Western Cape, taking a moment to brush the problem.
Also difficult for athletes to know where to brush on boulders like this, as the entire volume is a foothold and a handhold, and just relying on friction. Tony trying to build up some psych, figure out what the heck he needs to do on this boulder. This is one of those boulders where you kind of come out and have an idea of what you're going to do, but you learn as you go. Tony, definitely not his style, but he's going to try anyway, figure it out. I love that classic climber pose. As soon as you see their hands go on their hips, you know that they're definitely using a lot of brain power to figure out what the heck they need to do. I know I do that.
one of the cool things about climbing is it's not just a test of your physical ability, but it's problem solving, physical prowess, flexibility, neuromuscular coordination.
So one of the route setters made this boulder look like a cakewalk, and when I got on, I thought it was going to be too easy. I got on and got absolutely spanked. So I can tell you it's not easy, and you can see the not having a top yet. But it definitely comes down to that style and who uses their brain and figures out what they need to do.
Yeah, definitely practicing on this type of problem will help when it comes to figuring it out on the day.
I always like to call slab the great equalizer, especially in the men's division. Tend to spend a lot of time hanging on fingerboards, jumping around on campus boards and moon boards, and I never really see too many of these high-level athletes trying to stand on slabs with no hands. So I think after this there's always a slab in international competitions and local competitions. If you're listening at home and want to improve your climbing and your footwork, start slab climbing a bit more. Factor that into your sessions. So when you're holding the start hold, it's the undercling. I found that right hand that you go up to a lot easier as a palm, and you can see on Tony's face he is pretty stumped, racking his brain. There's the 1 minute buzzer.
Yeah, interestingly, as climbing has developed with the advent of sport climbing went more overhanging, steeper, bigger moves between holds, and that has led to some of the style in climbing that we see today. Tony just trying to use the top of his left foot to hold his body in there. Good use of some of that brain power we were talking about. As climbing got steeper and steeper, footholds and balance became less important. A well-known climber from the UK, Johnny Dawes, decided no hands climbing is the future of climbing for him, and you can check out some interesting videos of him doing really hard routes without hands.
Yeah, so the first competitions were purely power based most of the time, very much like most of the climbing that you see outdoors. And as competitions evolved and more people could just get stronger using training tools like campus boards and hang boards, the route setters started looking to more of these high risk routes and problems and slabs in particular kicking people off. Oliver Marks, good technical climber out now, and you can see
slightly different to the other athletes, keeping his left hand in the undercling position on the start volume, using that just to help pull his body into the wall. But underclinging does add more weight onto the feet. Sometimes that's essential to keep the foot on, but sometimes it adds too much pressure and changes the angle that you're using to press onto the wall, and that causes the foot to slip off.
a lot of the time a lot of climbers won't interpret holds or volumes well enough, and route setters actually intend you to flip your hands upside down, so change from a palm to an undercling like Oliver just did, and hand-foot match-up, which is actually a good way to do it, just with a higher right foot on that screw-on foot chip.
Flexibility being one of the key components of climbing performance. Climbers that can get their foot up high next to their hand comfortably need to push their sense of gravity away from the wall a little less, and that allows them to stay on and makes delicate moves like this a little more comfortable.
So he definitely wants that right foot a bit higher on that screw-on, but like I said in the beginning, with the technical nature of this boulder at the start, you actually want to do a bit of a step through, get your left foot as high up on that start volume at the bottom, so that you can get your right foot onto that screw on at the bottom, and that would make the hand-foot match on the start volume for your hands a lot easier. So take a look at his feet, there you go. And he's on,
Yeah, this time Ollie just using the outside edge of his right foot there in an effort to twist his hips around to face left. Requesting a brush.
Oliver pulling out his wizard's wand that he bought when he was a competitor in Italy. Anyone that's climbed with Oliver knows that brush.
Oliver getting a little frustrated there.
Yeah, I think he's frustrated, struggling with a bit of flexibility. But as I said, a lot of the males, you need to work on their hip flexibility, getting that hand-foot match in.
A hand-foot match being where you put your foot and hand on the same hold. Matching being where you put two hands or 2 feet on the same hold.
There's a lot of climbing lingo out there, and if you're a first-time watcher and this is the first time you've been exposed to any form of bouldering or sport climbing, do yourself a favor and Google some terms that you hear us using, because sometimes we speak without explaining exactly what we mean.
Yeah, in some ways climbers can have a conversation between themselves with non-climbers having no idea what's cracking. A little bit of the jargon that makes the sport interesting. David Nordia.
And speaking of cracking, the next boulder up soon. There's a bit of a clue for those of you that haven't interpreted that boulder yet. But this boulder is turning out to be a bit of a stump fest for our competitors. The route setters are going to start worrying now about whether it's too hard. Oh, David stepping through with left foot onto that foot, flagging his right foot. That's where you stick your foot out and don't stand on anything in particular, but you're using the leg that you flag out with as a counterbalance. David doing that step through, flagging his right foot out there, and hasn't seen the palm down yet. Shaking out the nerves. Some high tension in the gym at the moment. Everyone's eyes on this one boulder problem that we want to see a top on.
David Nordia, second in speed. Would love to get a top on this boulder. Can see how much pressure David's putting through that right toe, standing on that really little small screw on there.
David's smiling up at the clock.
He knows he has some time to figure this out, but not too much.
Come on, dude.
There you go, there's that flag with the right leg, changing his left hand to an undercling, stepping through. And all he needs to do there is swap that left foot down, up the left hand down for a palm down. As soon as he figures that out, I think he'll make some decent progress.
Yeah, Matthew Groenewald did really well to move quite high on this boulder during his session on it.
Doesn't like that.
1.5 minutes left for David Nordia. David and I have spent quite a bit of time together. David with a sneaky attempt to break the bait on.
That was considered. The route setters did consider that, and we decided that as a harder way to do it. but these guys like to hold things, so... Oh, there we go.
David really powerful there, using his heel and now his toe. He's into the zone.
But now the body position is all wrong, and as you can see, kicking him off. That's why we decided that way would be harder.
But
So
David managing to get the zone on that attempt. You can see he's using the pressure of his palm on that screw on to hang on to the wall there.
Happy with the zone. David's going to retire with 20 seconds left. You're saying about David?
Yeah, we spent some time together in South America. Buenos Aires at the Youth Olympic Games 2018. David, a very passionate climber, loves competing, loves climbing recreationally as well.
And that Youth Olympic Games was actually a bit of a test to see if sport climbing would be in the Olympics.
Yeah.
And South Africa was lucky enough to have 2 athletes represent, with Alistair being their coach.
Colin Curtis on men's problem 2, really using his flexibility and his length to his advantage here.
Colin always finding different ways that route setters struggle with to interpret what he's going to do next. Always manages to get himself in these weird positions.
Yeah, Colin adding another streak there next to yours on that starting volume as his foot slides down. You can see how soft the rubber is on a climbing shoe from the streaks it leaves behind. Colin just struggling to maintain his balance there. Checking the clock, taking a moment, wondering if he can try something else. Or not yet making use of that screw-on foothold, using his flexibility to compensate. As he gets high, he's bringing his weight and his hips over his foot, and that just changes the angle, causing it to slide down.
Karan has the uncanny ability to hold these weird like thumper clings and underclings in weird ways, which is a bit of a bonus if it helps. And you can see trying to find some more surface area on that undercling zone hold. Pulling in the brushes.
Yeah, you could see the muscles in Colin's calf really working as they try to apply just the right amount of pressure onto that volume. That volume is almost vertical and sloping away from Colin's body, making it really hard to keep your foot on there without it sliding off.
So a lot of you climbers will be used to being pumped.
Yeah.
Try go slab climbing and you get that awesome calf pump. And Colin making his way up, flexibility, and he's putting so much pressure on that left foot.
Colin inverting the undercling there with the right hand, swapping it around. Colin touching the top hold, but it won't be enough. He needs to show the judges he can control that hold.
He's going to walk his feet up and try get, there we go, before he stands up onto this finish hold and squeeze. It's not over yet.
Colin knows he's so close to getting this thing and just not managing to hold it.
Unfortunately, that won't count. He needs to establish on that top hold for at least, if you want to have a rough estimate, it would be 3 seconds. But he's now got 30 seconds. And the problem with slabs is now that he's rushing, he'll know that was his chance to get a top on that boulder.
My hands are sweating here in the commentary box, Kent. Half of it's the heat, half of it was the excitement of watching Colin top this problem.
Everything is sweating up here in the commentary box, Alistair.
Christopher Cossa, he knows now that if he can top this boulder, he's in a very, very good position. Not the most confident slab climber, but one of the most confident climbers in the field today.
Always up for a good time, brings the psych anywhere you go, whether it's climbing indoors, outdoors. This climber will climb right into your heart, folks.
Can someone bring me a tomato sandwich, because Kent just bought the cheese. Chris, on his first attempt on boulder 1, if he can find a top, he'll be very excited.
Oh.
Just slipping out. Can see Chris dropping his right knee down there in an effort to get his foot a bit higher. Twist his hips into the wall. Keep his center of gravity close to the wall.
That first attempt will definitely give him a bit of a confidence boost. Trying to figure out whether he wants to use that right foot drop knee beta. This boulder's just going to come down to thinking creatively and keeping his head together, like Karen showed us in the last attempt, that when you get there, keeping a cool head, matching those finishing holds is really important. So it ain't over till it's over. Chris pulling back on. Definitely going to want to slow his climbing down. Doesn't opt for the drop knee beta, instead goes for the hand foot match and a palm down.
That left hand really not providing much to hold on to. Chris wondering just how he's going to do this next sequence and get his hands up into the top holds. That top hold being the most important hold for him on this wall. Chris going for the palm down jump and just slowly swinging off there.
I won't lie, if he held that, would have been super impressive.
That would have been very impressive from Christopher Cossa.
But standing on those volumes, trying to figure out what you do, you can see how important it is to be fit, have that endurance, and being able to keep a cool head at the same time. Try different positions. The jump, I don't think, definitely isn't the beta. Working your way up and sitting on the back of your heel when you're standing on that foothold trying to match is the beta, or beta if you're a mat groom. The tension really high in the building at the moment. Just pulling his pants up, trying to make sure he's got enough hip flexibility so that his pants don't hinder him there. And he's going to want to walk his feet up. There we go, he's figuring it out.
Chris with 30 seconds left decides to call it a day on boulder 2. No tops on this boulder, but getting the zone on the first attempt will serve young Christopher Cossa well.
This could make this last boulder, all the athletes are going to be really hungry for a top on it. Going to make it really interesting. There you can see a close-up on that zone hold, just how small the bottom side is of that thumbuckling.
That hold just less than a centimeter deep. Can see the shiny top surface of the jewel texture, really slippery, just to prevent climbers from pulling down on it.
If they could have held it, they would have held it. So if you're sitting at home saying, why don't they just do that? If they could, they probably would have done it.
Nah, you know, you can see the left-hand side of that hold. Colin was crimping it for a few seconds, really tiny. Gives you a little indication of how strong These climbers' fingers are.
A lot of these climbers climbing outdoors, some of them have done some really impressive grades above 8B, 8B plus. I think even Chris has done 8C.
8C Boulder, 8C route.
Not 8C Boulder, 8C route.
8C route. Chris has done 8C route, yeah.
Some of the climbers haven't done 8B route, boulders, excuse me.
Getting a good look at problem number 3 here.
And the start is going to confuse a lot of you with a bit of a upside down Z's. And it's going to be a bit of a showstopper this, I think.
Young Matthew Groenewald, strong performance on problem 2. He's hoping to better that on problem 3. Matthew's a strong rock climber. Most of these climbers aren't that into trad climbing. Let's see how their jamming skills work. You can see Matthew struggling to twist around here.
Straight into a knee bar. That's an upside. That's where you put one foot on a hold and your knee pushing opposing force, and you can kind of take your hands off and twist around. And what they're going to want to try to do is shove their hands in between both volumes there, which is actually a crack. Trying to figure out which side he wants to go in from. And once you're in this position, it's really hard to get out of. You can see his foot is right in front of his face. And there you go, gets that hand jam in there.
Can see Matthew's taped the back of his hands to protect the skin from the texture of the volumes as he torques his hand into those gaps. Matthew onto the zone.
And those holds are going to be slippery. There's so much moisture in the air. Really humid here in Cape Town today. You see that far left volume is actually there for a reason, and he figures out what it is. It's a toe hook to allow you to match the zone and move your hands higher. So you'll see some of the shorter competitors having to do a bit of a karate kick out left, catch it with the top of their toe and squeeze so they can match both hands onto the zone and then move up. Those top holds are really slippery.
You mentioned a karate kick, and this problem has some hand jamming. Next year at the Olympics, Alex Honnold will be doing some of the commentating. I'm sure this boulder would appeal to him. Those of you that have watched the movie Free Solo be familiar with the importance of the karate kick. And with Alex Honnold, one of the most well-known recreational climbers. He's not very good at competitions.
I wouldn't call what he does recreational, but there we go. And he's back up onto the zone.
Can see him using his left knee there just to help hold his body in. The muscles of his calf are activating to apply pressure with his thigh.
And you can see the importance of that toe hook, and that's just to keep body tension as you do that next move up. It's really important. And Matthew seems happy with the zone. Saves some. Remember, they've got lead after this, so they can't completely throw themselves at any one given boulder. They have to take into account that they've got a lead route coming up, which also has some really hard creative moves on it.
Young Christopher Wallace, more at home on overhanging terrain than the slab.
You can see a lot of the competitors read this problem coming out with taped hands. I'm sure they try to figure out in the back there of isolation, how to tape their hands. So most of them probably have never climbed a splitter crack in their life.
That's true. There was a Boulder World Cup 2019, I think, where they set a hand jam. Adam Ondra, one of the competitors, loves all styles of climbing, made short work of it.
Some of the Japanese team were completely stumped by it.
I've heard that in preparation for future competitions they've done some crack climbing training.
Crack clinics.
They
bring in the wild boys. You can see young Christopher Wallace camming his toe in there. You can see how soft his climbing shoes are. And he's basically, when we talk about camming, shoving his toe in there and twisting his ankle so that he gets as much rubber. And he's got his hand in the crack, but trying to figure out how to jam. Very technical form of climbing.
Not that easy to do in the moment.
It's one of those things that's very hard to train, as most of the time you're going to encounter crack climbing outdoors. And South Africa also isn't very known for its crack climbing, but it is a useful skill to have.
You can see Chris just miming the moves here, going through the sequence in his mind. Visualization is a powerful tool that climbers can use to make sure their body's doing the right thing at the right time. There you can see that knee bar that they're using to help force their bodies higher. And there you can see Chris's hands forcing themselves open in that tiny gap. That was a good attempt from Chris there.
Slowly figuring out how to hand jam, and one of the key things he can do there is, when his hand is in that crack, trying to put his thumb as far into the middle palm of his hand as possible, and that causes a lot of his hand to open up and shove itself into that crack. You can actually cut, as in take your feet off and turn around on this crack, which I did.
Provided you know the technique.
You know the technique. I climbed this boulder without tape on there. You saw it exactly right there. He's figured it out. I climbed this boulder without tape on my hands, and the back of my hands are missing some skin. There we go. And Chris Wallace back into power mode. Doesn't see the toe. Opts for the bounce. Hopefully you'll look at that volume on the left. Remember that the route setters will not put something on the wall that doesn't have a purpose.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a game between the setters and the climbers. The setters give the climbers little clues. Climbers have to solve the puzzle.
That volume on the left there, with the good side. And if they look at that volume, they'll see the black scuff marks, kind of indicating that it's for feet, whereas if it was covered in chalk, you would know it was more for your hands. So we call it the language of chalk, which as a climber will teach you what to do and interpret what needs to be done. James taking some time there, looking really comfortable. Not happy with it. James would definitely know how to knee bar coming from KZN, climbing in the wave cave. This big overhanging roof, opting to go in from the left, which is definitely harder. We want to be coming in from the right, and there you can see.
There you can see James's fingers forcing his hand into that cupping position, generating outward pressure against the sides of the crack. His left hand going into the undercling screw on the left hand crack volume. James making good progress so far in his first minute, getting a brush.
Lots of different muscles in use here, going from hand jamming to engaging your bicep and undercling and standing tall onto that start volume. to do the next move up. They're going to start feeling a bit sore now, knowing that the lead is coming up. And I can tell you it's going to be a bit of a show with a lot of the moves in the roof. We'll see the route a bit later on in the day, but it's going to be a good show. James back on, establishing and finding his beta knee bar.
See James using the outside of his left heel there, opening up his hips, trying to bring his body a bit closer to the wall, using his thumbs to full advantage here. James just slipping out of the volumes.
So what I found a lot easier here was keeping my right hand in the crack and hand jamming, keep my left hand on undercling, doing the karate kick out left to the heel hook on the volume, and then moving up. But can you do it in 4 minutes? James will know he can do this boulder, and he'll want this to be his last attempt, and he's going to try hard. James, try hard. Bunga.
Barnes.
Seems like he's got this sequence a bit dialed. Working his way up in the crack.
Yeah, James trying the thumbs down hand jam there. Hand jamming with your thumb pointing up and your palm facing left with the right hand might be a little bit better there, allowing you to pull a bit higher up onto the wall, keeping your hand in a strong position in the crack.
You can see once they've learned exactly what needs to be done, they start making it look a lot easier than it is. And what James is doing there, that is awesome.
James,
that's what he was looking for.
Super chuffed getting to the zone.
He almost gave up before that last attempt and wanted to throw the towel in and rather take a rest. But that zone is going to be valuable.
The other competitors, of course, unable to see what's happening on the wall. Not sure if James got a zone or a top there, based on the clapping from the coaches and the other officials not involved in this particular discipline.
So after the boulders, they do not go back into the same isolation as the other athletes, just so they can't share any beta. So the guys that are left in isolation, or anyone that's competed really, will know what it's like. Sitting in isolation is the longest time of your life, waiting. You're just listening, you can hear the crowd, and you're not sure what's happening until you go out.
Let's see if Tony goes for the same foot first into the crack beta that he tried on his first attempt. He does. La Sportiva Solution climbing shoes, not necessarily known for their jamming capabilities.
You can see he doesn't like the tape on his hand. He's just gonna opt out and sacrifice the skin on the back of his hand. Those volumes are rough, they've got a lot of texture, so if you do not have any tape on the back of your hands to protect you, you can jam a lot better, but your skin is going to suffer. And Tony trying to jump into the start there, it's pretty much 100% forced. I think they have to do it the way that the route setters wanted.
That jump costing Tony an attempt.
Attempt and energy.
Attempt and energy, exactly. Much better technique there from Tony, managing to get his whole hand into the crack there. Just not managing to figure out what to do with the feet. The knee bar being much better, I think, for getting higher up on this problem.
When it comes to competition problems, and as a competition climber, it doesn't necessarily need to feel comfortable to be the right thing. Hand jamming in this instance is pretty uncomfortable, but it is the right thing to do. So Tony just needs to suck it up a little bit, and he's going to make his way through. So obviously looking at other ways to hold those volumes and try use power rather, something that he's more familiar with and a technique that he knows.
So something that's quite tricky here is that competitors aren't allowed to touch any of the other holds on the wall until they are established in the start. That makes Tony's jump into the hand jam not legitimate, and he won't be, even if he was able to hold it, wouldn't be able to count it. Tony calling it quits on problem 3.
I think these next few competitors are going to be excited to get out and just give us a try and see if they can figure it out.
Oliver Marks. Getting upside down into the start. Definitely not the first upside down start he's seen in his life. Similar beta to Tony, trying to jam and torque his feet into the crack.
It's quite interesting they choose that over the knee bar, which is really, really good. But that's the beauty of climbing. What's easy for me and works for me wouldn't necessarily work for anyone else. Yeah, going into that crack from the left is not easy.
Yeah, feet first jamming is quite often an offwards technique. Adam Andre used it in his Ascent of Silence, hardest lead route in the world.
If you're interested in seeing anything about or learning more about crack climbing and weird foot jams and hand jams and body jams, check out the Wide Boys. They'll teach you a thing or two about crack climbing and just how weird it can be.
The Wide Boys, boys with a Z.
Boysies.
Ollie making a little better progress there, but really struggling to get his hands into the crack. Not committing to the jam, trying to pinch the volume and use the screw on with the thumb there.
This is one of the challenges of being a route setter for these types of competitions, is trying to decide the level and take into account all the factors that are going into that these athletes are going to experience when they come out. Is, will they be able to figure out the technique? Ollie also opting to take off the tape. Will they figure out the technique? How much pressure are they under? It's a big thing to, as a route setter, try and think ahead and see what they potentially could experience and put a boulder on the wall that's going to separate the field and give a good show at the same time.
Yeah, Ollie getting a little frustrated here. It's understandable. It is frustrating to try a boulder again and again and not make any progress. One of the challenging things with setting, as Kane mentioned, is giving the athletes a boulder they can figure out and still have enough power left to complete once they have figured it out.
One of the the most important things is leaving little bits of clues. And you can see Ollie keeps trying to go in from the left, and that is considerably harder. You can see when other athletes like James Barnes was figuring it out, he would try one way, if it didn't work, try a different way. And that's some good advice for those of you that have projects at home. Explore different options and don't get stuck in a single way of doing things.
Yeah, it's quite easy to become a little focused on just one particular thing. Easy to think that one particular thing is the sequence. David also neglecting the knee bar. But his first attempt going to the right.
Sometimes you don't see knee bars until your knee kind of falls just in front of a hold, and then you're like, oh, there's a knee bar. And that's generally how I find knee bars. I don't generally see them straight off the bat. And you can see,
yeah, you can see how much power David's talking into his foot there in an effort to keep it in the crack. His foot pretty much supporting his whole body.
And he's going to set up to try jump into this crack. Nope. Realizes that's way harder.
Sometimes you know it's not going to work, but you just have to try, just to make sure that it's definitely not going to work.
And so he's being, sorry Alistair, he's being called off there. A bit of a technical rule. The start tape is only on the left hand volume that you can see there. That means to start he can't jump into the hand jam because the right hand volume doesn't have any tape on, and the hand jam requires you to touch both of the volumes.
David in a much better position here with the knee bar and the hand jam. That same left facing heel that we saw from some of the other climbers. David just not quite comfortable in the crack there, but making it into the zone.
Looking for that karate kick. Oh, just not enough. But that'll give him a glimmer of hope. With a good number of minutes still left on the clock. Slowly unraveling what to do here. There's the knee bar.
You can see David using his foot out to the side there to help swing his body around. David going to the zone from the hand jam instead of the undercling.
Switching to the undercling, getting the toe hook and that match I spoke about. And this is exactly what the route setter would want. And it's not over yet.
David just needs to find out what to do with his feet. Toe hook in the
There we
screw-ons.
go.
Very good climbing from David Nordia, the first top we've seen on problem 3. Smile on his face and the shake of the head says, boy, that was hard.
Great composure at the end there. And you can see how important it is. It ain't over until you match both hands on that top hold, which isn't that great. David took the time, worked his way through some toe hook underclings until he found a position that he felt was stable. Next up, Karen Curtis. Loves this weird kind of stuff. Opting for the toe jam first.
Can see Colin with just half of his hand, his palms not yet in between the two volumes. To get a really solid jam, you want the heel of your hand, the bottom half of the palm, to be involved in pressing between those two big holds.
These are the kind of problems you want to see testing athletes, and with David Nordia just before Karen here, you saw how he kind of evolved through the 4 minutes from figuring out each move systematically, and that it can be done in 4 minutes. just have to change your technique and try different things until you figure out what works.
Colin successfully solving the puzzle of the knee bar there, allowing him to get his hands deep enough into the crack, but not committing with the left hand to the crack, rather trying to gust on it, position he's much more comfortable with.
And like all climbing problems, it's just a process, and that's the reason they're called problems, because as climbers, when you solve them, figure out what to do. Colin straight into the knee bar, twisting out, hand jamming. And in that position, it's so good, you can take your feet off. Trying to hold those first two holds as an undercling. The far left hold on that left hand volume is much better. I'm getting a nice closer look.
Colin just running the clock down here, getting some energy back into his muscles.
These last few competitors will be looking for tops, and this boulder is definitely going to help generate those attempts to separate the field that the routers will be looking for. And there you go, on the 1 minute buzzer, Colin reading the beta. And she's up at the top. Some composure, and that's a top for Colin.
Colin super excited with the top on that boulder, and you could see once he was out of the hand jam and back onto the face climbing that he's much more comfortable with. He kept his composure and pulled it out the bag.
He will definitely be kicking himself that he didn't get that top on the second boulder. That would have put him in a really good position going into the lead final. And last out here, Christopher Casa recently bought his first set of cams, I believe, so slowly getting into the trad game. But let's see how Chris fares on this intro to crack climbing.
It's quite an intro with an upside down hand jam start. Chris managing to get into the crack without the knee bar, really indicative of his core strength and power, but not managing to stick it. One of the problems with going feet first into the crack is that your feet are committed to the crack and aren't able to help you once you have your hands in the jams.
So with this kind of climbing, you find a position that's secure, so you jam your feet in, and that allows you to move your hands up, jam your hands in, and that allows you to move your feet up into different positions. And with some cracks and crack climbing outdoors, you will do that the whole way up. You can see Chris figuring out that knee bar and side pull underclinging, realizes the jam, hand jam is the way to go.
Chris managing to get both hands in the crack, just sliding out of it. Little frustrated there.
At this point you'll start looking at the holes on that left hand undercling that he's going to want to go to and not stay completely in the crack all the way. Chris also opting to take off the tape on the back of his hands.
So the reason these climbers are taking the tape off is in an effort to improve friction, skin being much stickier than tape being a bit more protective though.
Yeah, climbing with taped hands is an acquired skill. It does protect your skin, but it can make hand jamming a lot more slipperier if you don't know what you're doing. So a lot of these climbers opting to protect the back of their hands. And Chris laybacking, trying to find some form of purchase. He's ignoring the holds on the left, you can see there. And those holds on the left are really bad in certain positions. So at the start, they're only good for feet. But once you're above in the crack, those holds become really good as underclings. So trying to look at holds from different body positions while still on the ground is also an acquired skill. Less than a minute left. Chris pulls on. Looking fluid.
The pressure must be weighing really heavily on Chris's mind. Yeah, he knows other climbers have topped this boulder. He knows the top on this boulder will set him in a really good position for the lead. Chris wondering if he can jump into it.
And like we discussed earlier, can't do that. And that is the end of the men's Boulder final. Interesting matchup. Next up, the lead final, which Alistair will be joining you guys for shortly. You'll see me on the mats belaying.
Thanks very much for joining us in the commentary today, Kent Jennings.
Always a pleasure.
From City Rock, Johannesburg. There's the start list for the lead. And if you check in on the app, can get some results from the boulders. Stay tuned and we'll see you in a few minutes.